in March 1836, things looked bad for those hoping to fight Santa Anna. By this point, most Texans had decided there was no recourse with Mexico. This is a full-on fight with the Mexican government. Even if Federalists take charge of Mexico, there's no reconciliation over what happened at the Alamo and at Goliad, and we're now fighting for independence from Mexico. As we talked about, this does not look like it's going to happen in March 1836 because you just had Santa Anna defeat the defenders of the Alamo, and Mexican army at Goliad had surrounded James Fannin and his troops and executed the vast majority of those troops. And these two events had sent Sam Houston fleeing east with what small army he had, fleeing east in the hopes of getting more volunteers in East Texas, and it sent Texas civilians running away, abandoning their homes, sometimes burning their homes in the face of this approaching Mexican army. So in March 1836, things did not look good for those hoping and fighting for Texas independence. Sam Houston's running away, and again, Santa Anna had just won these two major victories. So Sam Houston is here retreating in March 1836, and again, he's hoping that when he gets out to this area, this is an area where a lot of Americans are, and he's thinking maybe I can get volunteers from my army from this area. And as we talked about, Stephen F. Austin had been in the United States recruiting volunteers, basically offering money as well as promises of land in Texas for anyone that would come in and join Sam Houston. So volunteers are streaming over here from the United States. And one other thing, Sam Houston, again, he wants to get to the border of the United States because he's hoping maybe the American army, maybe Andrew Jackson, his buddy, will send soldiers into Texas and then help Sam Houston. Like maybe if we get close to the Mexican army, U.S. will see this as a threat and support us. So Sam Houston is running away. Well, Santa Anna, at this point, he'd already split his army up a little bit, but what he's going to decide to do at the end of March, beginning of April 1836 is, I've got to catch Sam Houston. Sam Houston's army, just a couple hundred people at the beginning of April, although it is growing as he gets closer to East Texas and as volunteers start rushing in. But you're not going to catch this with an army of 2,000 or so, which is with Santa Anna at this point. So Santa Anna is going to make the decision in April 1836 to split up his forces. Again, a smaller army is always going to move faster than a larger army. Waking up 2,000 men, getting them dressed, getting their horses together, marching them. It just simply, logistically, it takes longer than a couple hundred men to do the same thing. So if Santa Anna had kept his forces together, he would not have ever been able to catch Sam Houston. So what he's instead going to do, send some of his forces one direction to sort of surround Sam Houston. He's going to take his army, go this direction, and a chunk of his army will go down here and reinforce Koss and some of the men marching along the Texas coast. So Santa Anna will break up his army and continue to pursue Sam Houston. Well, Sam Houston's forces are going to learn that Santa Anna has divided his army. Basically, about mid-April, there's Mexican couriers that are sending messages in this region. Some forces, Texas forces, are going to capture these couriers, and they're going to decipher or translate the messages they're carrying, learning that Santa Anna has only got about 1,000 men in pursuit of Sam Houston. It's actually going to rise up to about 1,350 with Santa Anna, which, by the way, I always thought was unusual. The president's leading the army, but Santa Anna, part of the reason he had risen to power is because people saw him as a general, and this is a time when you need a military leader. So if he wasn't leading the army, probably would have lost a lot of respect. So what Santa Anna will do, he's got these men, 1,350 or so, Sam Houston a couple hundred. Well, by 1820, with these volunteers coming in and with, again, volunteers from East Texas, Sam Houston's numbers had risen to about 900. And during this time, by the way, all the men with Sam Houston, they're seeing him run away, and they're constantly saying, turn around, let's fight, let's fight. And these cries are going to grow even louder when it's learned that, hey, we might even have a chance because Santa Anna had divided up his forces. But Sam Houston is going to continue to say, no, we've got to get close to the U.S., we've got to find the right opportunity. But you're going to have a lot of members of his army saying, you're a coward, why are you running away, why are you running away? Well, on April 20th, Sam Houston will retreat to this area, keep running in this direction. He's going to retreat to the area that's around this area called San Jacinto. And when he gets to this area, he's going to cross past this open plains region that he's going to realize this would be a good area to attack Santa Anna. And basically Santa Anna's forces, again, this is just Santa Anna's portion of the army. Other chunks of the Mexican army are going one direction, another direction. Well, Santa Anna's portion of the army is going to make camp on April 20th at this area that Sam Houston believes makes them open to attack. There's basically an open plain that he thinks that if the Mexican army starts proceeding past it, it's going to open them to fire. Behind the area the Mexican army makes camp, there's this huge swamp, and it's going to be difficult to retreat from. So what Sam Houston's going to determine on April 21st, 1836, is Mexican army still has more men than me. 1,350 with Santa Anna. I only have 900 men, but I think that I've got a good approach to attack them. I don't think they have very many places to retreat. And he's going to see on April 21st that the Mexican army, for whatever reason, has sort of slowed down. And as a matter of fact, in the mid-afternoon of April 21st, they're not really prepared to fight Sam Houston. Now, the Mexican army knows that Sam Houston forces are not too far away from them. They've been following them for a long time, but they're not preparing for them to turn around. And you can kind of understand that. Again, if Sam Houston's been going one direction the whole time towards the United States, probably after a while you're going to let down your guard, not thinking that there's any chance they're going to turn back around and attack you. For whatever reason, maybe because of this, there's not going to be any guards left to defend the Mexican camp, or very few to watch for Sam Houston's forces. Some people, by the way, think that part of the reason that the camp is ill-prepared for an attack is that it's the siesta. Like there's a tradition that goes all the way back to Spain where post lunch hour you sort of relax. Maybe mid-afternoon, the Spanish or the Mexican soldiers are sleeping. Some people argue that on April 21st, the reason that there's Mexican forces aren't prepared is because Santa Anna had taken up with a prostitute named Emily West, or you'll sometimes see her referred to as the Yellow Rose of Texas. And while he's busy with his prostitute, his forces aren't prepared. Whatever the case, just know Mexican army has made their camp and is ill-prepared, not expecting an attack from Sam Houston and his forces. Well, Sam Houston will decide this afternoon that about 3:30 that this is the time to attack. And again, he's going to be attacking a group. This group technically on the defensive, who's got more men than him. He only has 900 men. He's going to decide that this is the time to attack. And on 3:30 or so p.m., Houston is going to order his men to turn around at this Battle of San Jacinto, rush across this open field, and try to overwhelm the Mexican camp. Well, 3:30 p.m., the Texas forces under Sam Houston, they rush across, and sure enough, they're going to find the Mexican army is not prepared. Once the Texans are going to start overrunning the Mexican camp, obviously cries will go out, hey, they're here. But by this point, a lot of the men are sleeping. They try to grab their firearms, but a lot of them are groggy. They're away from their horses. They're just not prepared for battle. And this is going to mean that the Texas forces under Sam Houston are going to easily defeat the Mexican forces. You can't form lines if half your men are in the tent, the other half are, doing whatever. And so this is going to allow the Texas forces to very quickly and easily, and I say quickly, this battle is going to be over in 18 minutes. And during this battle, they're going to kill some 630 Mexican soldiers. Some of the soldiers will be firing back. A lot are simply going to be running. As a matter of fact, the Texas forces will be calling, remember Goliad, remember the Alamo. Again, they had friends that were just killed at the Alamo, and Goliad offered no quarter even after they surrendered. So when some of the Mexican forces are running away, the Texans aren't going to offer them quarter. So a lot of the Mexican forces will start trying to retreat into this swamp. If you're in a swamp, you're not going to be running very fast, caught in mud, things like that. And a lot of the 630 Mexicans are going to be killed as they're retreating. An additional 630 will surrender and are going to be captured. So as you're seeing the Texans come in, 630 killed, about 730 or so will be captured. During this 18 minutes, by the way, that this battle will take place, only 8 or so of the Texas forces will die. So again, 630 Mexican killed, 730 captured. Now Santa Anna initially is going to retreat. So the second this his lines break down, Santa Anna is going to start to take off. But he's eventually going to be captured. Before he's captured, it's interesting because he will have changed into a ensign's uniform, basically a uniform of a lower officer, because he doesn't want to be identified. But he's going to be captured in that. So it's going to take a second for him to identify him. So basically, Santa Anna's portion of the army is captured. Well, this isn't the entirety of the Mexican army, because there are still some 2,000 or so Mexican soldiers still left in Texas. The army had decreased by this point from deserters, things like that, but you still have some Mexican soldiers out here. Well, these forces are going to decide right after the Battle of San Jacinto. Hypothetically, they could have gone in and just immediately attacked Sam Houston's forces, and they probably would have won. Instead of the forces that Santa Anna had sent up here, if they'd gone down here, surrounded Sam Houston's force from this side, the forces were coming this direction. If they'd have met around San Jacinto, probably would have defeated Sam Houston. But they're going to end up deciding we need to. They're a little bit worried about what's going to happen. They don't know what happened to Santa Anna. They're also don't know exactly what forces that the Texans have. So they're actually going to decide to retreat and regroup before pressing Sam Houston's forces. When they retreat, one of these sort of things that says, God loves fools, drunks, and Texas, there's going to be a horrific rainstorm that will basically turn the entire retreating road into mud. They call this a sea of mud. Mexican soldiers will say they never saw as much mud as they had before. And so the 2,000 plus Mexican soldiers falling back are not going to be able to regroup, because they're going to start losing their equipment, their supplies, their cannons are going to be dragged in this mud, and they're going to lose a lot of their equipment as they're running away. Archaeologists have recently just started uncovering this stuff, and so you can go out there to this day and you'll find all this Mexican equipment that's half buried in dirt because of this sort of failed retreat. So basically, Santa Anna was defeated, and the rest of the Mexican army is going to be forced to abandon their equipment. They're going to end up retreating back to Mexico. Well, what happens to Santa Anna? As we mentioned, he tried to retreat, but he's eventually going to be captured. He disguises himself as an ensign. Well, somebody's going to be walking along, and the story goes, I've heard people saying this is true, other people say it's not true, that as he's walking by, a Mexican soldier sees him, sees the president, sees this general, and basically salutes Santa Anna. Santa Anna, of course, like, shut up, put down your hand or whatever. Again, I'm not 100% sure if this story is true or not, but whatever the case, a Texas soldier notices this and says, wait a minute, realizes that this is Santa Anna, and is going to bring Santa Anna before Sam Houston. Sam Houston had hurt his leg during the battle. He's resting under this oak tree, and he's going to confer with Santa Anna about what's going to happen next. So you basically have the president of the country that you're in rebellion against as your prisoner. Well, Sam Houston is going to make Santa Anna sit down and sign 2 treaties of Velasco. All right, so if you've got him here and you got a centralist authority, all government is basically centered around Santa Anna, then you've got control of their government. Well, what Sam Houston will insist that Santa Anna do is sign the Treaty of Velasco, basically saying, first one says, Texas is now independent of Mexico. Now, up to this point, and this is the way it had been under Spain, this is generally considered Texas. Very few people lived in this area. Nobody had ever considered this area over here Texas. It's always been New Mexico. But this area was generally considered Texas. So from San Antonio up to this area over here is East Texas. Nobody really lived in this area between this Rio Grande and the Nueces River. Well, Sam Houston is going to insist that Santa Anna recognize Texas independence to the Rio Grande River, which is going to mean that part of New Mexico will be in Texas, and so Sam Houston says, you've got to recognize our independence, and we want it to the Rio Grande to basically form a buffer zone between this Texas, this now independent Texas, we'll call it the Republic of Texas, and Mexico. So Santa Anna, you signed this first Treaty of Velasco. Santa Anna, again, not really have any other choice if you're surrounded by the enemy army, will sign the first Treaty of Velasco. The next Treaty of Velasco, and you can kind of think of them as the same one, but the second Treaty of Velasco will basically be a contract that Santa Anna says, I promise to go back to the Mexican government and get them to recognize Mexican independence. So basically, they're not sure that, how much authority it will carry if Santa Anna just goes back with this treaty that he obviously had to sign under duress. So they want him to sign a second one, basically making a personal promise. I'm going to do what I can to ensure the government of Mexico recognizes your independence. So Santa Anna will sign these two treaties. There's actually going to be a lot of fighting here because a lot of the Texans had friends at Goliad and at the Alamo. A lot of these guys want to kill Santa Anna because basically, he killed their friends, ordered their execution of their friends. But Sam Houston realizes this is going to make these treaties invalid if I kill the person that signs them. So he's going to have to fight off these forces to keep Santa Anna alive. As a matter of fact, Sam Houston, in order to get further recognition for this new Republic of Texas, he doesn't send Santa Anna directly back to Mexico. He's going to send him to the United States to speak with the American president, to basically tell the American president, yes, this treaty is valid. We need to recognize Texas's independence. So Santa Anna will first go to the United States, speak with American President Andrew Jackson, then he's going to return to Mexico. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the second Santa Anna gets back to Mexico, he's going to say, I signed those under duress. We don't recognize Texas independence. We're going to get that back eventually, but that's going to be a problem for the future. So this is one thing that comes out of this Battle of San Jacinto, Treaties of Velasco. Another thing that's going to come out of here is Sam Houston. Again, he'd only recently arrived in Texas. He was a prominent politician in the United States, fairly famous in the United States, but here he is. He's just won this major battle with very little loss of life. People before the battle were calling him a coward. They were saying, why are you running away from Mexican forces? But here he's, nobody's questioning him now because it looks like he's achieved this stunning victory and won Texas independence. He almost immediately becomes the most popular person in Texas. And as a matter of fact, you'd say the second most popular person, Stephen F. Austin, he's going to lose a little bit of popularity because a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, up until your imprisonment, you kept, constantly pushing us to work with Mexico. But the Sam Houston guy, he stepped in and he is this hero of San Jacinto. You'll sometimes see him referred to as this the Sword of San Jacinto. So now we have, at least with the Treaty of Velasco, this new Republic of Texas, and again, this Republic of Texas that recognized by Santa Anna going all the way up here because this is where the Rio Grande River goes. So what does all this mean? What is this Texas Revolution for? Well, it's kind of interesting because the Texas Revolution, there's tons of debate over this revolution. Some people even debate the term revolution is applicable to here. So this is just sort of arbitrary, but the word revolution, again, you can have a revolution over how you book hotel rooms. You'll sometimes see like tech people or whatever, this revolutionizes the way we use video game controllers or something like that. This revolutionizes the way you can binge watch TV. But the term revolution, as defined by historians, is historical events that, one, significantly change a government of a place. So like American Revolution would fit this. You have a monarchy being converted to a democratic republic. The Russian Revolution, you have a monarchy converting to a socialist government. You have things like the Haitian Revolution, where you have a monarchy switching to a republic. those are revolutionary. You know, those big changes to government. Revolutions are generally a lot of bloodshed. Now, there is bloodshed here in the Texas Revolution. You know, you had 200 so people. You had a lot of death. On the Mexican side, you had a couple hundred die. So you had a lot of death in this Texas Revolution. But as a percentage of the population of the Republic of Texas, it's not going to be that significant. By 1836, the population had risen to over 35,000. So you have, 2,000. That'd be at the higher end of the death estimates. That's not. I mean, that is a significant portion of your populations, but you compare that to something, some of these other revolutions, like the Haitian Revolution. It's not as much bloodshed, especially if you take out the Mexican soldiers from outside of Texas that died. So it's kind of bloody, but not as bloody as other revolutions. You are going to have a change in government, although we are going to see it going from a republic to another republic. So you change where the government's headed, but you don't change the type of government. Some people also question whether or not this is a revolution, because usually revolutions come with social and economic change. So again, Haitian Revolution, in that revolution you had slaves rising up against masters, taking control of the government, and you had this change of lower class becoming upper and middle class. And you had Russian Revolution, workers rising up, taking over the aristocracy, the wealthy up at the top. American Revolution, by the way, you didn't have that. Some people question the American Revolution, but some people are going to make these questions about the Texas Revolution because there's not much bloodshed. There's not a change in the style of government. Again, you could argue dictatorship to a republic, and then there's not going to be any economic or social change because people, as we're going to see, some people got poor as their farms were destroyed during it, but most of the people are going to return to their farms and be the same social status they had before. So some people question whether you should use a revolution or maybe just a successful rebellion. Another question that comes up with the Texas Revolution is, why was there this revolution? Now, this isn't like the American Revolution. American Revolution, you can put it down to Enlightenment. You had this Enlightenment thinking at the time calling for end to monarchies and a change to representative or democratic government. And then you add on to that Britain changing the system, starting to charge colonists more in the form of duties and taxes. There's you can point to a factor there. You can also, say for the Civil War, you can break that down pretty much to slavery. For one reason or another, Southerners were threatened by the fact the North might take away their slaves, or were nervous about this, and they revolted. The Texas Revolution, not that easy. Some people say it's, in all the arguments, a lot of these arguments at least are very understandable. Some people say it's because the chaos within the Mexican government. Mexican government had too many problems, constantly switching back from federalist to centralist government. This chaos was unusual to a lot of the people from Texas, a lot of Americans who had stable government, more or less, from 1780s until the 1830s. They come in here and they're constantly seeing one government overthrow the other. Some people say that this was inevitable because you had too many cultural, racial differences between the Americans coming in and the Mexicans. So you had a Catholic, Spanish-speaking group, you have Protestant, Americans, different ethnicities. Maybe this was inevitable. Again, people might argue against this because for the first period when Americans were moving in under Stephen F. Austin, 1823-24, you had the Mexicans, the Tejanos, and Americans working together well. So there might be something to that, but I don't know if that's a major factor. Some people argue that this revolution was about slavery. A lot of people feared that that the Mexican government threatened their ability to hold slaves. There were limitations on slavery. We talked about, with the Coahuila, Texas government. Shortly before Santa Anna invaded Texas, there was he told all slaves they could be liberated within Texas. There were actually some small slave revolts, slaves crossing to Santa Anna's army. And then even before that, again, you had the slave issues we talked about in the 1820s, 1830s. And some people say that even though slaveholders were maybe only 25% of the people in Texas, in 1835, 1836. The slaveholders, controlled a lot of power. Again, there's maybe something to that. There are a lot of other people that say this is or maybe a conspiracy theory behind this. Some of the people that had come in 1835, 1836 at the consultations of 1835, some of the people pushing not just for separate statehood but for independence, some of them had ties to landholders over here in Louisiana in the United States where land was becoming increasingly expensive. Some said if we could get Texas out from this Mexican government, land would get a lot more value. So some people argue that maybe it was the influence of these land speculators that pushed the Texans over the edge. Some people think Andrew Jackson sent Sam Houston with the express purpose of inciting a revolution against Mexico. There might be some truth to those things, but again, with the Texas Revolution, I think it's not clean. There's a bunch of different things that entered in here. Again, it was you can't dismiss the slave threat entirely. You can't threat to slavery entirely. You can't dismiss the constant overthrow of the Mexican government. Maybe there is something to the difference in cultures. So just know that it's not a clean revolution, and again, it might, if you go according to this arbitrary definition of revolution, might not actually been a revolution because, again, it doesn't change the style of government as much. You are going to change the location of government, and it's bloody, but not as bloody as other revolutions. So again, it may be referred to as rebellion. So anyway, next time we're going to talk about the first thing that this new independent Republic of Texas will do is immediately say, can we please become a part of the United States?